Now, we're doing something a little bit different here. Instead of having a company who sponsored this event, and we appreciate the sponsors of the event, let me tell you, but instead of having the sponsors present the whole time, we're going to give some time for some of the members of the wireless community. Right now we have Avert Bob talking about Disaster Tech Lab. And tomorrow morning we are going to have Herman, I'm not going to try it, talking about Plan Sayball. But for now, I will turn it over to Avert. Let me step out of your way, and then you can start up.
Yeah, everybody. This is going to be a slightly different presentation than what you've seen most of today and most of what you will see tomorrow. It's going to be a lot less technical for several reasons. One, I'm not going to admit, I'm not going to even claim to be as technical, trained experience as most of you here. The second reason is that our work that we do with Disaster Tech Lab is a lot less technical because we work under much less ideal circumstances, and rather than trying to build the best network, we're trying to build any network or the quickest way and bring connectivity to the areas where we work in the quickest way possible. Now, as you know, we're called Disaster Tech Lab. I actually founded the organization back in 2010 after the Haiti earthquake, and initially called it Haiti Connect because we were only focused on working in Haiti at the time. We grew, we expanded globally, hence the name Disaster Tech Lab. Our mission, our most primary mission, is bringing internet access to people in disaster-hit areas. And by people, I mean the people living there, the people directly affected by the disasters, the people who are suffering because their houses and their infrastructure has broken down. Our secondary mission is to provide internet access and IP-based communications to other NGOs and disaster relief organizations because they need it, simple as that, and quite often it's not there. They might have their own proprietary radio systems, but communications is becoming a hyper-connective community and society that we live in. It's become so important that we're trying to fill that gap. Another thing we're trying to do, we're trying to create a pathway, to use a fancy word, for data between the local citizens in the disaster-hit areas and the greater community out there, the people who are not only you and I who are not in the disaster-hit area but trying to follow the news, but also the response organizations who use digital media more and more to actually get actionable data to tailor the specific responses to the disasters. And lastly, we're trying to get away to all this data, because what happens a lot in disaster response nowadays, you get people going in there, researchers, academics, gathering data about what has happened, who is operating in the disaster areas, what are the needs, and quite often those people do spend 1 or 2 days in the disaster area, gather a huge amount of data, then go back to their offices, process the data and create reports out of that, quite often in short time frame. But that information, those conclusions and that advice based on that data doesn't make it back to people in the field, simply because there's not enough connectivity. So we're trying to provide that two-way channel where data gets out of the disaster area to people who can actually do something with it, and then from those people back into the field where people are who can actually use that and then better respond to it. Why do we do it? Or why do we use Wi-Fi? That's a question we get asked a lot, because people go, okay, disaster response organizations use VHF, UHF, all kinds of proprietary systems. Historically, we made the decision for Wi-Fi for 2 reasons. One, it's the field I was working in when I kind of got the light bulb went off to actually do what I'm doing now. 2, we looked at what are people using? What is the most common medium for connectivity? What does everybody have on their laptop, etc.? What does people have on their phone? And that was Wi-Fi. So by building a communications system, a channel around Wi-Fi, we didn't have to bring in the client devices because people had them. We didn't have to train people on how to use them because they knew how to use it. So it allowed us to respond much more quicker to the actual needs. That was a lack of communications platform that was across the board. Again, I'll show you some historical data further on. But what happened, a lot of disaster response organizations would go into an area and they would bring their own little radio system. They would have a couple of handsets, they would have a repeater, and that would allow their workers to talk with their command center, but it wouldn't allow communication across the different organizations. So everybody was in their little silo, talking to each other in their organization and saying what they were doing. But organization A wouldn't know what organization B, who was maybe 2 miles down the road, was doing. And so there was duplication of action, there was no sharing of resources, so there was a lot of waste in disaster response and not enough tailored response. And actually step out of the way so you can see this. The communication was also very important for the local citizens, because again, everybody goes in there, all these organizations, from the UN, the International Red Cross, the World Food Programme, but also the smaller organizations, they looked after their own communication needs. But we live, as everybody says, we live in a hyper-connected society. Everybody is always online. I mean, you know yourself, when you go somewhere, you check into a hotel, what's the first thing you do? You check your connectivity. I've been in disaster areas where people go, I've no food, I have enough in the pantry for, 1 or 2 days. I have, some batteries for my flashlight, but I have no internet access. And that seems to be more and more something that people find, it's become a primary need. So we bring that connectivity to those people, to give them means of communication to the official organizations such as FEMA or whatever, but also to stay in touch with their friends, their family, and let them know what the situation is. And like I said, the increased use of digital technology, crowdsources data is what I mentioned earlier there, that data is used through social media channels from Facebook and Twitter, etc., is actually harvested and filtered and used to tailor disaster responses. How do we do it? So I'm just giving you a quick rundown and then we go in a bit more detail. We use Wi-Fi. We create local wireless LANs in areas that we go into. We create wireless hotspots. We create mesh networks. Now, and so some of you have the opinion that mesh is not a perfect technical application. Keith is not a great fan of mesh. For us it is, however, because we work in an environment where there's so many factors that are not dependable. Power might not be dependable. Infrastructure might not be dependable. So we have to quickly build up a network that's quick to set up, but when one of the components on the network fails, that the network self-heals. Mesh does that, so that's one of the big factors why we use mesh on the larger deployments. We backhaul everything over VSAT historically. That's the kind of most common medium in disaster response. But what we see more and more lately, especially in deployments we've done in the US, that we also use 3G or 4G or LTE to backhaul our networks over. For the simple reason it's available, it's less costly. VSAT is horrendously expensive. The equipment has to be shipped in, and we can do sometimes when there's a 3G or 4G network or LTE available, it's much easier to plug the network into there, build a small wireless LAN. And power is another issue. We power it by generator, but we're building more and more solar power applications. We're looking also at wind power, where small wind turbines are used to power the equipment. So, benefits. Now, again, some of the things local civilians need access to data, what they can see, where can they get food, where can they go for aid, where can they go for medical supplies, where can they claim for insurance, where do they register with FEMA? I mean, in the US, for instance, FEMA, obviously, when a disaster happens, you register with FEMA with aid. We found out just over a year ago when we responded to Hurricane Sandy, we went to the Rockaways area of New York. For people to register for FEMA aid, they had to do it via the website. Now, there's your problem. Houses destroyed, there's no power, there's no electricity, there's no internet access. How are they going to register? So what we did, we put in wireless internet access. We create kind of ad hoc internet cafes with some laptops where people can actually just come in, do their FEMA registration. We help FEMA themselves, who send field workers into the area with laptops but without internet access. So that's one of the things that we provide. Access to basic information, like I said. Regain also basic communication with friends and family. So, a simple thing is being able to go online and send out a tweet, to your contacts. Okay, we're in Oklahoma, we're hit by a tornado. We're in Boulder, in a flood hit area, whatever. But I'm okay. I'm in this temporary accommodation, because people want to know what's happening with each other. Your phone lines might be out. So that's a quick way to reach out to the general audience. Another thing that we've seen is in a lot of the locations where we put in temporary internet cafes, as we call them, with, like I said, with a couple of laptops and access, where people are rehoused temporarily for 1, 2, 3 months at a time. It gives them something to do. It's a really simple thing to put a couple of laptops in and see that 80% of the use might be Facebook and social media, but it's something that these people don't have. Great example is one of the places where we deployed after the Moore, Oklahoma tornadoes last year was a place called Steelman Estates. It was a trailer camp or trailer site with about 60 trailers before the tornado. All the trailers were destroyed. People were basically living in tents in the middle of nowhere. They had a medical tent, they had a food tent, but what did these people do during the day? Beside cleaning up the mess and trying to rebuild their lives and their young kids, at least they had something to keep them out. They had something to keep into contact with them, with their friends, their family, deal with simple things like paying phone bills, paying utility bills, or dealing with utilities, getting reconnected. All the basic things that we take for granted every day that we do online. These people lose. So that's one of the things that we bring into the situation. And again, the last few points, it's like the different organizations that respond, from the larger ones, as I mentioned, the UN and the Red Cross and World Food Programme, with the larger disasters, down to the smaller organizations that you see in the US, a lot of the faith-based. You had a question? Yes.
I was going to say, so who typically funds a deployment? Is it typically like the emergency response organization like FEMA, or is it the end user that's paying to play when they get in front of the computer? Who pays for it? Who pays for it? Right.
Well, I mean, we have most of the equipment is donated. Like when I started out in 2010, and I'm going to point to that later, Aruba was the first one who stepped up to the plate, because at that point it was basically an idea I had. And I went looking to all the different Wi-Fi manufacturers and said, guys, I want to do this. Who can supply me with equipment? And I got promised, we'll send you 3 access points, or we'll send you do this. And I go, really appreciate it, but that's not going to do the job. So Aruba basically got back to me and said, okay, have a look on our website. Tell us what you want. And so I sent them a list going, this is great. If you can give me some of this, but they actually turned around and sent me everything I wanted. So that was a great start. And they've been supporting us all along, but equipment is basically donations. Our engineers, our people, are all volunteers, so nobody gets paid for what we do. Our overheads are just covered by financial donations, which is basically our biggest challenge. We were very lean, cash lean organization. We spend about 99% of what we receive in donations actually spent on the ground delivering aid. But still, it's our biggest hurdle every time to come up with the actual finances to cover costs like travel costs, accommodation, even food. A lot of our volunteers pay most of their own expenses themselves. I've been doing this 4 years. I've been doing it of those 4 years, a year and a half full time. I'm not even making a wage out of this. We're working towards that point where I've turned the organization from a charity into a non-profit, so we can do some commercial activities and generate some dependable revenue stream to basically allow for continuity in what we're doing. Because I've been doing this for 4.5 years now, and it keeps growing and it keeps growing, and the need is there. So we have to have continuity in what we're doing, and that's where we're looking at revenue streams now from commercial activities that we can use to fund our charitable work.
When you're in a disaster scenario, how much focus do you give to things like regulatory compliance? Just out of curiosity, right? Because if you're running,
a lot of focus.
do you take APs that you would run in the States and deploy them out of country, and vice versa, because you're just trying to get something up off the ground?
No,
do you have a set of gear for each country?
Well, we pay attention to it. We try to fit into regulatory compliance as much as we can. Like, for instance, at the moment we have people deployed in the Philippines in the beginning of December. And for one of the first things we did is we contacted, first of all, the equipment manufacturers. The equipment want to send out to say, listen, guys, is your equipment certified to use in the Philippines? Yeah. Can you send us the paperwork? Yeah. Then we contacted the Philippines National Telecommunications Organization. We're bringing in this equipment. Is it okay? Now, their process, we were told, can take 3 or 4 months to actually okay that. So we were not going to sit around.
Yeah.
But, we've notified them. We did the right process. And in all practicality, we try to stick to the rules. We don't want to break them.
Sure.
But in the end, our focus is on helping people. So, if we sometimes have to walk a bit of a tight line between different things. But again, compliance is important, but it's not the only factor we consider.
Sure.
Yeah.
For
sure. But again, we use it as a means, a tool to allow other organizations to become more effective in what they're doing. Because what happens again is that large and small organizations, there's still not enough coordination. It's a challenge right across the world in disaster response that you get a huge influx in disaster area. Everybody wants to help. And on the fingers of one hand, you can count 1 and 1 is 2 that there's going to be people doing the same things that other organizations. If they don't know about each other, then there's going to be duplication of access and waste of resource. So we're trying to get all that information and the situational awareness via these communication channels. Now, historically, how did I get into this? I was involved in the late 1990s in Ireland in a voluntary organisation called the Irish One. Now, Ireland is a very rural area. We still have crap broadband in most of the country. We had even worse broadband there then. And there were a whole lot of geeks living in the countryside who, 56k dial-up was the best you could get. So we basically found a few geeks that were living in the city and said, okay, can you get DSL? We'll all chip in some money. We get a bunch of DSL lines. We bundle them and we start building point-to-point links out in the countryside. So we all get broadband. Geeks being geeks, we obviously weren't going to buy all the stuff off the shelf. So what we did, we built our own hardware. We got old PCs. We stuck different flavors of Linux on it and used open sourced drivers, etc., and repurposed pay TV antennas. I don't know if it's clear, but the kind of mesh kind of antennas. Build our own hardware, build our own mounting hardware that we did. Did a lot of experimentation, and basically in a period of a couple of years, this graph doesn't come out very well. But we grew the network with hundreds of people across the country, all voluntary, basically building your own hardware, but with the purpose of providing internet access in areas where it wasn't available. So that's kind of something that I was involved with for a few years, and it kind of stuck in my mind that it's a great thing to do. It shows you that you can actually, by being creative and being willing to get stuck in and rolling up your sleeves and sticking your hands into up to here into a server, you can actually get stuff done. Yeah, roll forward a few years, and in 2004 we had the big tsunami in Southeast Asia. I was actually driving across Europe as the news was coming in, and because my father was actually from Indonesia, so hence I had an interest in what was happening there. I heard the reports, and one of the things that stood out to me in the following weeks is that there was a huge influx of aid organizations and aid supplies being sent to Southeast Asia with no coordination. It's what I mentioned earlier. There was no coordination. You had hugely devastated impact. Multiple countries, over 300,000 people dead, millions displaced. So there was an urgent need there. But this is how the organizations responded. They were all in little silos. They all spoke to each other. Nobody spoke to anybody else. And the way it was is that you get a situation like this. You get supplies, food sent, clothes sent, whatever kind of supplies. They get dumped in a building or by the roadside. Nobody's coordinating distribution. Medical situations where a temporary hospital was running out of antibiotics and there was another one 5 miles down the road who had a surplus of antibiotics, but because they didn't know about each other, people died unnecessarily. And I got this brainwave, I'll just go back here. I got this kind of brainwave of going, you know what, if you build a network that's A, quickly deployable, B, easily accessible for everybody, then you have this channel. That's the channel there for those people to talk across. So I kind of, throughout the years, worked in the back of my head, kind of worked on the idea, came up with some concepts. Actually didn't do anything practical with it. For a simple thing, I was building up my own business. I have a growing family, just, to kind of make decisions. Let's dump everything and to go chase this idea. Wasn't a possibility. And then come the end of summer 2012, we kind of sat down, we were a bit more organized. We actually had a board for the organization. And we said then, okay guys, how about we expand, we set up a global capacity where we can take all our knowledge that we've gained in the last few years, all the contacts that we built with different aid organizations, and we set up a team where we can respond to any disaster anywhere in the world within 24, 48 hours of being asked to respond, and we can go in there and we build networks, build backhaul, and help out, basically improve the communications between the different NGOs and the aid organizations, but also provide connectivity to the people who live in these areas, because they're quite often, and they're still quite often forgotten or ignored when it comes to connectivity in the follow-up after disaster. So we started working on plans. Like we decided we want to have 5 equipment caches globally. We want to have basically going North America, South America, Asia, Africa, and Europe, so that we didn't have to ship stuff, because at that point we had equipment mostly in Haiti. And we weren't going, okay, we can't, for every disaster, ship stuff all around the world. We want to have relatively, for certain area, equipment cache that we can ship quickly. We need to have volunteers. Again, volunteers that we can't fly, that we don't need to fly all across the world. Volunteers that relatively local, and we're actually expanding that now, working with Aruba and some of the Airheads volunteers and the engineers, where we get people almost living in the area where the disaster hit volunteering to help us for different reasons. It's logistically much easier. They don't have to travel long distance. It doesn't cost us a fortune to get them there. The time commitment from those people, those volunteers, is much less than when you fly them. When you pay $1,500 to fly them somewhere, you expect them to be there for 1 or 2 weeks. What we've done, for instance, a lot of the deployments in the US, we had people locally go, you know what, if you want to give up, come in an evening after work or your Saturday or Sunday and come and help us out, that works fine. And that model has worked really fine. Plus, those people have local knowledge. They know the local law enforcement people, they know the local response organizations, they know where, if we need to get some hardware, some tools, they know where to get that, they know the road, so it works much more efficient. So that's why we want to have 50 or more trained volunteers. We're working on that. Another thing that we want to do is we want to do training days, and of course we need to have training manuals. Yeah.
So a question because that actually was a question I was going to ask you about, was this whole volunteering, and how does somebody get involved in that? Because when you made the comment that you had all those Aruba APs and nobody knew how to set them up, but you had 2 days to figure this out, it would seem beneficial that, especially with like the talent that's at this table and in the other tech field day events and just in the social community, being able to have like I'll be willing to be on call list, so that when you have a disaster that you're asked to do, here's the people that you can ping. Sam and I've got Cisco experience, so if you get a bunch of Cisco APs that are being shipped down to you, okay, here's a couple guys that we can call to figure out, okay, what are the caveats that we're going to hit right off the bat? Airtight. Who's the guys that you can call at Airtight?
Yeah.
Who's the different people?
Well, that's exactly what we're working towards. I mean, what I said at that time when we got all the Aruba stuff, that's in 2010 when I just started out. We've worked now where we have a certain network, we have some volunteers, we reach out to the different communities.
And I think that goes hand in hand with the equipment caches. As manufacturers or where...
Mike,
sorry.
because we are recording.
So with the equipment caches, as manufacturers or other organizations volunteer equipment for you, you need to know what you have, where you have it, and where the experts are for that equipment.
Yes.
And it might be the manufacturers themselves, whether it's a systems engineer, a VAR, or even among the wireless community, a volunteer. So just being able to know what equipment you have, and you said something is better than nothing. It doesn't matter which vendors are donating equipment, just so that you have what you need to provide the needs, right? So as long as you know what you have and where it is and where the people can be of benefit with the local language expertise and the equipment expertise and the outdoor versus indoor and all that kind of stuff, that really needs to be...
Agreed. I was actually going to get to that later because we're working towards that now. Anyway, we need to do R&D because one of the things that we're also going to do is we've identified certain areas very specific to disaster response that there isn't exactly the equipment that we want to use. So we're doing a bit of R&D now. We're looking into developing that further. So that's and it's also something that engages the community, as to call that, of volunteers in between the deployment. So actually at the moment we're developing an online forum where people actually go, okay, I volunteered with the organization. I'm interested just to contribute to my technical knowledge. So we can say, okay, now we're currently in the Philippines. We're running into this technical issue, and people can go to the forum and go, oh, wait a minute, this is something I worked here, I've encountered, or look at this, and maybe you can solve the problem that way. And that information then is immediately available for the people who are in the field. But in between the actual deployments, we can kind of tap into the whole community and the different volunteers and build up a database. And then when we have to deploy, we can, for instance, put shoot out an email or put it up in the forum. Listen, guys, we're going to do it there. We need people with these skills. Who's up for volunteering? So that's we're trying to build a bit of a community, but we're a small organization and it's a lot of work, but it's all in the pipeline. Then, obviously, when we made that decision to deploy or build up this global capability, we were in the stages of developing our plan and the needs to do that. When Superstorm Sandy hit, I was actually monitoring the development of it. I knew what was happening, and on November the 3rd, we got a call from an organization that we work with, Humanity Road, you know them, Keith. They do a lot of coordination on the ground. They said, we're sending an RV down to the Rockaways in New York. We have no internet access. Can you guys help us out? So we reached out to Aruba at the time, and they helped put us in contact. They put a call out, I think, to the internal network. We got a bunch of volunteers. We had somebody on the ground within 24 hours, network up and running in 48 hours. And that kind of evolved from just that small bit of connectivity that was asked in this RV's command center to something much bigger. We were asked, once we were there, other organizations were setting up like what they call their warming tents. It's basically big tents where food was handed out, with heating, so people could come in to heat themselves. They could register for aid, all kinds of stuff, medical care. All those locations needed internet access, so we were asked to provide that. FEMA was setting up DRCs, the disaster response centers. They needed connectivity. We were asked to provide connectivity to some of the buildings with a volunteer fire department in the Rockaways, which basically washed out user communications, coordination centers. We provided them with internet access to Wi-Fi. But one of the things we also did, and we did before we even deployed, we thought crisis mapping. I don't know if anybody has heard the term. Crisis mapping is basically digital mapping, and you crowdsource all the information needed. I started, even before we went out there, I started mapping the locations of active Wi-Fi access in New York directly after the storm. I worked together, for instance, I spoke to contacts in Boingo. I said, Boingo, can you see in your data center anything in the New York area which actually being used, that data has gone through? So they sent me spreadsheets every 3 hours of all the data. So we put it up on an online map that was shared within the disaster response community for simple reasons. So that's another thing that we kind of contribute, and that even didn't require anybody being on the ground. I was doing it from Ireland. Once we're on the ground, we're trying to build, after a week or so, we're trying to build an idea, what communication services are available, what Wi-Fi access, what internet access, but also what cellular services is available. We're talking to FEMA, for instance. Guys, can you find out, can you talk to Verizon and AT&T and T-Mobile and find out what of the cellular networks are working? And they asked, and telcos were going, no, we're not telling you. No, they don't like to tell people when their network isn't working. So we did a thing called the Wireless Signal Survey, and which made it into a FEMA report, but it basically, the way it was done, I stuck my laptop in my little backpack. I had a solar panel that powered it. I had basically wall walking, scanning for Wi-Fi and scanning for other networks, and I just walked the whole length, put the whole thing up on a map, put it in the report, and just went to FEMA. Here you go. This is data, and they were impressed. But I mean, that goes, and I could see what kind of access point, I could see what was secured, what was available, and this just picture gives you some idea of the devastation, the Rockaways. That's some of the equipment we deployed. We had AP-175s stuck up with the tripods that we put.
I was going to ask a question about the cellular survey. Can you drill? I mean, this kind of high level, so it's less useful. In your mapping, can you drill in a little bit more granular to say, is my neighborhood, is service out in my neighborhood in this type of a mapping that you've done?
That was only the active service, so you could zoom in right to the smaller level and see, is there anything in my area?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, we would like to even create a kind of heat map model where you can see, where the service is, but that's just something that's at some point in the future. But
right. What I was thinking is, if you had something like this and you could advertise it, say in disasters, people know always where to go. Maybe you have a specific domain name or something. People always know where to go, and maybe they don't have cellular service, but if they get internet, they say, okay, I always know I can go to this area and get cell service during this disaster, because that's what towers are up for my carrier.
Yeah.
That's useful information.
Yeah.
That's
I know.
really useful. They don't have to find it. You've already found it.
But to get it, since the telco's not going to give it to you, you'd actually have to do.
Yeah, you'd have to do your own survey.
We've actually
Pretty sure there's a certain vendor that has a quadricopter that flies around that's been.
Well, that's, as I mentioned earlier, the drones. Like we've been working on that. We also got out with I don't know if any of you use the OpenSignal app. OpenSignal measures cellular networks. Yeah. We've worked with those guys. They developed an app called Crisismapping, which does the same, but it doesn't just create the heat map going, here's cellular cover. It actually polls for what the speed of the connectivity, the actual cell tower, so it gives you much more information if it's actually live, what kind of the quality of service is. So we're kind of developing that. We've got the app end that gathers all the information, it pulls it into the database. We're just working on the interface now, so it creates an actual heat map. So, and we want to kind of do the same with Wi-Fi, so it actually polls,
if everybody would run that app and it would pull that information, upload it to a database, and then everybody could go and see where the signal is. Oh, that's fabulous.
So that's one of the things we're working on. I mean, it's some damage, but that's as simple as the deployments that we had. AP-175s with panel antennas and omni antennas put up in different locations, up on high buildings, and some of them were just on ground level. That's one of the volunteers that was working on it with all the equipment in the background. Don't know if any of you has ever seen one of these. You have, haven't you?
Coolest thing ever.
Yeah. Gator balls. You all know a satellite dish. Big, massive dish. Awful, especially big ones. The real job to transport it. You have to break it all down. This is an inflatable satellite dish. It's a big space hopper with an antenna on it. So what you do basically, they pack up basically in Pelican cases. You go to the site where you have it, you plug it into a power source, it inflates the ball, you just aim it, and you have a little satellite modem with a bunch of Ethernet ports, and you plug your equipment into that. And that's your satellite backhaul. Great equipment. They have them in different sizes, horrendously expensive. The one you see there is $110,000 to buy.
Oh, cool.
But at the point is that they do a lot of DoD contracts, so obviously that's where the money comes from. But they had a few of those deployed in the Rockaway, so we used those for backhaul. The picture's not clear. This is the equipment on top of the Sal School and Church in the Rockaways, where we had it up higher. This is one of the big tents here. There was like basically food distribution in there. There was food in here, first aid, all that kind of equipment. But again, I mean, this is several years on from the Haiti disaster, and there was still lack of communication, because even while I was there, I spent about 2 weeks there, and I came across when it started raining, pallets of donated food just standing out in the rain, going to waste, and guys sitting in a tent and a forklift there, and I'm just going like, whose supplies that? I don't know. Can you drive the forklift? Yeah. I said, well, get on the forklift, put the stuff on there, put it out of the rain. This is just lack of communication. So that's still there, and we're still pushing that. And one of the things we want to do in the near future, and we're working on that, is actually on top of the Wi-Fi network that we deploy, is actually deploy a locally run, almost like a website, a web application, a portal, all this communication that all the different organizations in that area can connect to our network, upload the information. So go, okay, we're here, this is what we do, this is our capacity, this is what we're doing tomorrow. So everybody has access to that. We're working together with the National Medical Information Library in Bethesda, who has a huge amount of data on disaster response. Want to stick that on a big NAS device, so when we deploy a larger scale network, you plug the NAS device in it, have a nice captive portal over that. So give these people internet access, but bring part of the internet that the data they normally access to our little VSAT backhaul, bring that already and host it locally, so we take some of the load off the actual backhaul. That's the equipment. Yeah, see that? The big picture is very unclear, but you see that's on the roof of the building. We have the AP175 here. This is background. This crumpled thing is one of those gator balls before it's inflated. So again, just bring it up in the two cases on the roof, roll it out, inflate it, plug your equipment in, and off you go. And the AP175s, that's the workhorse that we use quite often, especially for that kind of deployment. Point to point, longer distance, they're not ideal, but especially in the instant access port mode, it's so easy to stick them up, and they work. And even the older equipment, like the AP85s I mentioned, in Haiti, we had them there. Outdoor, in the outdoor, outside buildings, several hurricanes, no issues. They were rock solid, and they would go down when the power went, and then power go back up, and they would work again. So, really impressed with the equipment. This is some of the solar power we use from Gold Zero. Those things, they're the size of a bowling pin. They have a normal connector for a solar panel on there. They have a connector to charge them from the wall. They have a normal main socket on it for your equipment in there. But you can run a small AP175 would run, depending on, normally would run about 10 or 12 hours on one of those. So what we did in some deployments, we would install one of those, plug the AP175 in it, have a large enough panel to charge that up during the day, and that would keep it running most of the time. Again, sometimes it would be down for a few hours, but we work on a best effort basis. So, that sounds good. That's a picture. There's lots and lots of APs. We had a whole bunch of access points shipped in by Aruba when we went to Sandy. Obviously, lots of work, configured them all, getting everything set up. That's the up center in one of the schools. You see lots of cable run. It's basically, it's a school. A whole bunch of people, different organizations come in there. They all need internet access and communication and all other services. So we went in there and provided the access, run cables, controllers. As I said, cooking up Wi-Fi. That's actually a toy little cooker in one of the schools, so hence the title. But it's all very ad hoc, very improvised, and as I said at the beginning of the presentation, it's not your perfect show model Wi-Fi network. But you can in those situations. You can't go and do your big extensive survey and do your. I wish I could. You know, it would be perfect, but you just can't. You go in there, you have limited tools, you have limited power. Sorry.
Yeah, so you mentioned 3 months on an earlier slide. How do you manage the transition back to fixed permanent services for the users, and then how do you kind of unwind the deployment of permanent equipment?
Well, we kind of like quite often we install the equipment, make the servers are once everything is up and running. It's kind of we take a step back and we monitor. We're there for support. We have quite often, depending, like in the US, we might have somebody locally just who's on call for support. Obviously, when places like Haiti or the Philippines now, we need to have people that we've flown in there to keep the network running. And if there's any need to extend it or new locations. But anyway, by the point the other services, the normally pre-existing services start coming up, we send some volunteers in to actually take down the equipment. But we wait, obviously, till all the other stuff, and then pack it up, ship it back to our warehouse, which is in Austin. Then all the equipment gets serviced, tested, the reports get written about any issues that were happening, or anything that needs repairs, that kind of stuff. Just some of the information. Like in the Rockaways, we were there from 4th of November when we put the first network up till I think it was the middle of January that we had the last equipment decommissioned from there. And especially in the larger warming tents, there were 2 locations with large warming tents. We had, I think it's about 250, 300 individual sessions every day. And that was either from people walking in or people who are working there. It's not a huge amount of sessions, but it still shows that there's a significant amount of use. So the need is there. We obviously feel that kind of need. This shows you mapping, and this is the Rockaways. I don't know if anybody is familiar with it. It's a peninsula, so you can imagine like when Sandy came to it, just washed over the whole thing. So we have the different warming tents here. This down here are the 2 fire houses for the volunteer fire department that we actually had to put a point-to-point link in, and these were just like warming centers, food distribution areas that we put Wi-Fi in and internet access. And this was a nice extra. We got approached during a Sandy deployment by FEMA. FEMA had set up a thing called the FEMA think tank, which is self-explanatory, but they wanted to look into new technologies. They'd seen that the current approach by FEMA, or the then current approach, wasn't working. They go, hey, there's all these people doing these really cool things with all kinds of new technology. So we want to get in on that. We want to be with the cool kids and do all that stuff. So they set up this think tank where they had people from academic world, from some of the tech industry. And because we had helped some FEMA agents and some of the field officers out in Sandy, we got a call saying, listen, you want to join us with the think tank, which is just basically brainstorming, what kind of new technologies can FEMA use? How can they use that to improve their response? I think 2 months after the deployment, we got invited. There was a FEMA think tank in the White House. Now, coming from Ireland, that was a really cool thing. You get an invitation to the White House, but we got to sit with all the big heads around the table and tell a bit about our work. And I got a nice little certificate saying that good boy, did some great work. So it was nice to get that official appreciation. And then we kind of obviously had a bit of a slow period. There was no deployments going on. Next thing that happened, we got the big hurricane that hit Moore, Oklahoma. Again, I think I got the news. I was coming back from Dublin, and it was just on the Irish news. So I reached out to some people in the area that I knew and said, okay, give me some damage assessment. Where do I need to go? What do you think? Help put me in contact with some of the people of the local emergency response. Based on the feedback I get, we proactively deployed to the area. Again, in the end, we're there for 4 months. We went in and set up in different areas. We went in Moore itself. We set up in 2 locations, and we actually worked together with the first time an organization of Team Rubicon. I don't know if anybody heard of Team Rubicon. Team Rubicon is an organization. Sorry?
All the ex-military guys.
Yeah. It's basically set up by 2 guys, 2 ex-Marines who, same time that we started, after the earthquake in Haiti, they basically decided with about 6 of their former guys that they had served with, all medics, to go down to Haiti and just provide medical aid. And it's kind of grown. It's become a disaster response organization, purely for veterans. So it has a kind of, it helps people who's been hit by disaster, but it's got also really therapeutic value for all the veterans. They deal a lot with PTSD, all that kind of stuff. Fantastic guys, really, really proactive. Huge, grown that into a huge organization in the short period. We helped them out. I knew them from Haiti. We helped them out. We set up, it's the interesting thing about the more deployment is that we ended up setting up Wi-Fi internet access and internet cafes in a synagogue, in a Baptist church, and in a tent camp run by a biker gang. So, you don't get a bigger mix than that, but it was just really interesting. So we provide, again, using VSAT, internet access in different areas, especially the last place right out here, which was in the middle of nowhere, which is the tent camp that I mentioned earlier too. I'll show you some pictures in a minute. We set up a couple of laptops in one of the tents, and those laptops, they were being used 24 hours a day. We were monitoring logins and that, and it was constant people on it, constantly. That's outside the Baptist church. We worked with DishNet for satellite backhaul. That's inside one of the meeting rooms. It looks like there's no disaster, but I mean, 200 yards from that church, the tornado had carved its path. And I spoke to one people in church. He was there during the disaster, and he said actually they stepped outside the church. They saw the tornado coming straight from the church, and he says it actually went around the church at the last moment. He says that might have been divine intervention or not, but that started to function as a disaster response center. So a lot of aid was coming in there before it was distributed. A lot of volunteers from different areas were coming in there. And that's where we provided internet access, see all the laptops that we send up. That's the tent camp out there. It's a kind of panoramic picture. You see the kind of circumstances that they were living in. They were getting a huge amount of aid. This is a mast that they provided for us, and we put equipment on there to put a point-to-point link into the nearest backhaul. And then locally we put a couple of APs in the different tents. See, that's the tent where the stable where we put all the different laptops. And again, they were used. That was their recreational tent, but they were using it for their own coordination. But there were also people just in their off time who were living in these tents to just actually be able to go online. Just another impression. Then the next disaster, Boulder happened, big flooding. So again, I jumped in a plane, flew out. We got a bunch of volunteers together, equipment shipped from Austin to Boulder, September 14th. This short description, like you see, I mean, that's what September, October, November, December, 4 months again. We only recently pulled in the last equipment. That's the kind of damage we encountered. Like the plane around Boulder, and that was flooded. But by the time we deployed, that water was already regressed. So there was a lot of cleanup. But if you went up into the mountains, like places like Lyons and Jamestown and all that, was severely hit. The road infrastructure was so badly damaged. I mean, we had to spend hours and hours trying to find ways to actually get to the places where they needed help. So interesting enough, we were asked beforehand when we were going out there, we were asked, for instance, like by other relief organizations and FEMA going, can you guys take pictures of if you come across damaged roads and let us know where the roads are impassable, because we don't have that data. It's a bit odd because there was a volunteer organization at the same time who were using drones to do aerial surveillance of the damage, and they were actually told to stop their flights because they weren't, the FCC regulations with drones weren't actually completely worked out, so they weren't allowed to do that. Hence, they didn't have the data. Hence, they were asking us, can you tell us when you try to get there, how you can get there and how not? This, again, where we put two locations, Longmont, where there was two disaster response coordination centers, one in network in Lyons and one down here in Jamestown. Now, both Lyons and Jamestown were really badly hit. Like, I mean, Lyons was about 50 to 60% of the houses destroyed. All utilities and all telecoms infrastructure was gone. Great thing is, like, CenturyLink, who provided fiber out there, was fairly quick to at least restore some of the fiber to relatively near to Lyons. So we were able to plug into fiber, do point-to-point link into Lyons, and then in the center of Lyons, where all the aid was kind of centered at the food distribution, we provided basically a Wi-Fi bubble, so that anybody coming in there, we couldn't hook up every house, so we got, okay, here's a bubble of Wi-Fi. If you live nearby, you need internet access, you come down here, and you can sit in your car, you can sit in one of the tents there and go online. Same for all the different aid organizations coming in there, so they could get online. That's in Jamestown, Jamestown was a complete disaster. The river kind of goes around Jamestown and then through the town and back out again. But the bridge, the culvert under the bridge became blocked with trees which had already fallen down from a forest fire they had there earlier. So the river just goes, okay, well, the bridge is blocked, so we just go around it straight to the town. Wiped out huge amount of houses, wiped out the fire department's station, so like that service was out of order. Again, we provided backhauling there. We used eventually we switched over to VSAT, set up a bunch of laptops in the local town hall. This again shows you some of the damage. It's not too clear, but like literally roads disappearing, roads being moved by the water into the houses. Houses completely gone, a huge amount of devastation. That's just some of the pictures where we're working, setting up some of the APs, just sitting on the back.
So another follow-up question. Do you have any statistics about how many users, like unique users, use the service?
I have some, yeah. I can send it to you if you want.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see, how many unique people like per day, and then how many people you impact during the course of the event, and kind of what the traffic profiles look like.
I have some. If you want, I can email it to you, yeah. But I mean, it kind of depends. In Sandy, after Sandy, the Rockaways, we got a lot more users. We got several hundred a day because it was just much more densely populated area. More was, I would say, about, it started out with 75 to 100 and petered off a bit towards the end when people go back to the houses. In Boulder, like up to even Jamestown, we got, in the end, 25, 30 a day. But I mean, this is like towns with 200 inhabitants, so you're not going to get a huge amount of usage. But it was the only way of internet access for them, and we provided some VoIP phones so they could make some calls. I'll just quickly cycle through these pictures so you see how we're working, setting up the equipment there, mounting it, solar panels just mounted. That was in, I don't know if anybody of you know the Oscar Blues chain, the pubs in Boulder and that. We actually ended up setting the equipment on one of their premises. Some of the VSAT that was eventually brought in. Then the Philippines, and I've only got less than 5 minutes, so I'm just going to cycle through this quickly. We sent a team to the Philippines in the beginning of December. This is one of the first installations we did in homemade or local-made enclosures. We sent people out there with controllers and access points, but they had them mounted in buildings that weren't waterproof. They didn't have waterproof enclosures, so they got the local craftsmen to build little wooden enclosures. Very intuitive because they were all sealed, waterproof, but if you see the bottom here, there was a little air vent so they wouldn't overheat. But I mean, they were just literally, you work with what you have, so that was that's the building that we had to put the equipment in, so you can see they needed some good enclosures. That's our network planning. That's in one of the towns we're working at the moment. That's in the town of Santa Fe on the island of Bantayan, 130,000 people, 7 NGOs working there. No communications at the point when we came there. We got a VSAT up and running. That's the VSAT there. That's it's the town of Bantayan. The different locations that we connected up here were just all point-to-point links. Some more planning, some speed tests, some more high-tech network planning. Some field testing of equipment just in the... Now, this is the past, just to go where we go toward the future. This is how we used to ship our equipment. Cardboard boxes and pallets. This is how it currently goes. We got some Pelican cases. Those 4 actually donated by Keith here. We got some more recently donated.
You got clean ones.
We got clean ones, yeah. But this is what we want to do in the future. We want to have modular, pre-packed, pre-configured kits, like a Pelican case with APs, bridges, VoIP phones, switch power, all the tools and consumables you need to install it, that we can literally go, okay, volunteer A, you go into disaster, here's your kit. Yeah. This is all what you need. You can go to a medium-sized disaster response center. You have everything you need. It's pre-configured. Switch it on, and it's up and running. Makes us more efficient, makes us quicker to deploy, more coordinated, and it's safer also to transport it that way. This is one of the guys who went to the Philippines with the 2 cases of equipment. So we're slowly getting there. This is our big project we're working on. Ooh. Last year we bought a 55-foot trailer that was formerly owned by a NASCAR team. We're building that into a Wi-Fi trailer. There's some pictures here. It has a big airco on it. The belly box is a generator, white water, clean water and grey water systems, and we're transforming that into, see with the pictures, it's going to have a conference room in there, it has a shower and bathroom ready in there, it's going to have 5 workstations, a whole lot of equipment in there, but we basically, the end goal is that we want this trailer kitted out. There's a disaster anywhere in the US, because that's where this is available. We roll this into town, fire it up, and first thing it does is create a big giant Wi-Fi bubble. So anything within a reasonable range, people can come in and connect. We mount bridges on there, so we can build point-to-point links out from that area. We have a canopy that we can roll out the side, and tables, and a bunch of, say, 10 or 15 laptops or tablets that we can have an internet cafe for people that come there. It's really geared towards providing internet access to the people who live there. So not the NGOs or the relief organizations. Yeah, we do that too. But these guys have enough money. If they're really stuck, they can pay for it. We want to help the people that are still being ignored, that you're going, yeah, here, here's some food and here's some water and here's a tent to live in. But these people want internet access. That's the US. They also want it in the Philippines, etc. But that trailer is what we're working on now. That's a big project that's been fitted out at the moment. Challenges, what we face, logistics. It's logistics of not only getting the equipment to the location, but actually having the equipment. For instance, when we deployed to the Philippines, we shipped 4 Pelican cases of equipment via the charitable foundation who provides shipping for disaster response organizations. Those cases, they disappeared. So they'll eventually come back to us, but we were stuck and having to do an emergency shipment of other equipment. But anyway, that's the logistic issue. Training. We're working now on setting up training days. We want to have the first training day in Q2 of this year, where we do train people, volunteers on Wi-Fi, but we also want to train them on situational awareness in the area of security when they work in areas like Philippines and Haiti, first aid, that kind of stuff. But it's also a way for us to get to know the volunteers and for the volunteers to know us. So before the disaster. Some equipment design and R&D. That's both the kits and developing some new specific equipment. One of the things we're working on is a outdoor mesh AP with large onboard storage that syncs itself across the mesh with running a web server and a captive portal, so you can stick data on there, and if you just change the data on one mesh device, then it just syncs it across the whole mesh and everybody can access that data. And the biggest of all is funding. As I mentioned earlier, we're largely dependent on financial donations, which is the hardest thing to come by. Equipment is not that difficult. There's very good people. Aruba is a great example. They've been extremely generous for the last 4 years. Other people and manufacturers are also generous. To actually get cold hard cash to pay the overheads it's unbelievable, and it's only getting harder. But anyway, that's the big issue. But also the funding. If we pull in more funding, then all the other things kind of become a lot easier. But yeah, that's the challenges we deal with at the moment. So I think I've finished my time now.
Well done, Avery.
Thank you.
If you could, real quick, how can do you accept donations from the public, and how can we get involved and give to this organization?
Well, there's different things. I mean, we have a donation facility, an online facility on our website. That's the simplest thing. If somebody wants to donate money, they can do that. If corporates want to donate a slightly large amount, we have 501c3 certification, so they can contact us directly and we can do it that way. That's the easy way. Small donations, use the website. If you need 501c3 paperwork for tax reasons, let us know. We'll issue that. Anything else, just literally contact us via either email me or give us a call, and we can arrange whatever is the best way to do it.
Very good.
And if any of you want to volunteer at some point in the future, just want to say, cool, yeah just say one. Even I'm on call, let me know when there's a deployment, and because I tell everybody who volunteers, it's not an obligation. You can say, okay, I'm potentially interested, and when we need somebody, we can contact you and say, well, sorry, I can't. Fine. I mean, I know what a commitment it is to volunteer to do this kind of stuff, so I'm not going to hold it against anybody if they say, well, I can't, I'm not available this time. So that's as simple as that. But anybody who says, I might be available, just, if it suits, let me know. So, if you are, or you know anybody, just give me a call or come and talk to me.
Excellent. Yeah, so we're gonna put the URL up here as well. It's disastertechlab.org, and I'm sure that the group would appreciate any contributions that anyone has to provide, expertise, time, money, whatever you need to help out this.
Yeah.
And personally, it's great for me to see people using the technology that we talk about for something good, good, just unequivocally good to help people. Because too often we focus so much on, this company versus that company, or this technology versus that technology, tech for tech's sake. And we often forget that the whole point of this is to do something for people.
But you know what? It's really cool. It's the coolest work I've done. I mean, I've worked technology for a couple of decades now, but this is the most satisfying stuff I've ever done. I haven't made a penny out of it, and that's not why I'm doing it in any way. And I've taken a 75% drop in income, but you meet the coolest people, and it's just it's just really, really cool.
But it sounds like there's a lot of creativity to it too.
There is.
You show up somewhere and you have to figure out how to make it.
That's it. And it's just improvise. It's the old Boy Scout thing. Adapt, improvise. Or the Marines. Adapt, improvise, and overcome.